Today we are going to read children about narrator's visit for her mother's belongings and narrator's stream of thoughts while she returns back from Mrs. Dorling's house. We are on page number 12. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. Convinced children refers to, if you remember, the last part of page number 10, where we studied that narrator had asked her mother if she had an agreement between her and Mrs. Dorling that Mrs. Dorling is going to save their all nice things up to the war, and when they return back she is going to return back all their belongings, precious belongings. So the mother understood that the narrator was not convinced at all by the thought that she was having, that it was not necessary on her part to have an agreement between her and Mrs. Dorling. She looked at me reprovingly. Reprovingly means scoldingly, because she felt that it was an insult to ask like that, to ask about the agreement between them. And after that we spoke no more about it. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station. So this was a series of thought, the stream of thought that was coming to her mind. She remembered the days when she got to know for the first time about Mrs. Dorling. So meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to the things on the way. Why? Because she was lost in thought. The other point is that she did not want to look at all those things that were associated with the memories of her mother. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war, but I did not want to go further than was necessary. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. So the reason she specifies that she did not want to pay attention on the things that were more than necessary or that were not on her way, because all those things were associated with her mother's, and the mother was no more in her life now. So if she would look at those things again, then they would all revive the memories of her mother. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Dorling in front of me again, as I had the first time I met her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got up late and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out, a woman with a broad back. "There is my daughter," said my mother. She beckoned to me. Here, so beckon, she gave a signal. That's the narrator's mother, Mrs. S, gave a signal pointing towards narrator to Mrs. Dorling, who had come to take their things. A day before only, the mother and the daughter had a conversation about her, and now the narrator was able to see that lady who was taking and saving all their nice things. The woman nodded, so she just shook her head and picked up the suitcase under the coat rag. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat that showed that she was not well off, and whatever she got, that she used to wear. Therefore, she might be tempted to take the narrator and her mother's belongings. In Marconi's, now, does she live far away? I asked, seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with a heavy case. In Marconi Street, said my mother, number 46. Remember that. So, that day, the narrator was given the address of Mrs. Dorling by her mother. I had remembered it, but I had waited a long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all that stored stuff, and naturally, I was also rather afraid of it, afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed, which were hidden away in the cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their place again, which had endured all those years because they were things. So, the narrator remembers the address that was given to her by her mother, saying that they should remember that they have kept their beautiful, nice, antique things at Mrs. Darling's house that she has carried away, you can say. So, after the liberation, when the war was over, then she remembered all those things, but initially she was not interested in the stored stuff, means interested in taking back all those stored stuff. So she remembers that because she did not go there, therefore Mrs. Darling might have thought that she and her mother had died. And after, like when she went after the war, then she was afraid first to confront all those things because all those things were associated with the memories of the mother. She just wanted to see them, touch them, and remember her mother more. But now it appeared that all those things, though they were waiting in the cupboards, but that was all useless because after the war, there are possibilities of their non existence. So people might have thought that they might not return back, and they were used by them in such a manner as if they were their own things. So waiting in vain, the things were waiting in vain until they were put back in their place again suggests that the things might be thinking that they are going to again return back to Mrs. S. house, and they were taken care of. This, the narrator thought, endured means taken care of for all those years because narrator thought that Mrs. Darling would return back all those things. But we have already seen what happened. But gradually everything became more normal again. Bread was getting to be a lighter color, means of good quality. During the war, they might not get a good bread to eat. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened. So, here again there was a bed on which the narrator or anybody else, those who were the victims of war, they could sleep comfortably without getting afraid because the things were normal again. A room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. Now people paid more attention on the room around, on the decoration and many things that they were not thinking of when they were in the war because they were thinking that they might lose the house that they are living in. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions that must still be at that address. I wanted to see them, touch, and remember. Remember who? Her mother. So she says that one day suddenly she thought about all those things that were kept safely as she thought in the cupboards and at Mrs. Darling's house, and she felt that she should return back and take the things from Mrs. Darling because she wanted to see them, touch those things, remember her mother. All those things were associated with her mother, her mother's memories. Therefore, she wanted to visit there. So, if the examiner asks you that why did the narrator visit Mrs. Darling's house, this is the answer. After my first visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time. So now, while the stream of thoughts were there in her mind and she remembers the reason of her coming to Mrs. Darling's house, she thought that though the first visit was useless, she would try the second time to meet Mrs. Darling, to see those things, to touch the things that were theirs, and remembers her mother who was no more in the world. Now, a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. So now children, if examiner asks you that why did she visit the second time, the same reason you will give. And then you will add this sentence that the first visit was useless because Mrs. Darling did not allow the narrator to enter into their house. No, she said, my mother's doing an errand. Errand means work. So when she visited the second time, the girl of 15, that was the daughter of Mrs. Darling, opened the door and the narrator asked her if her mother was at home. And then the reply of the girl to the narrator was that she is working somewhere and the mother had gone. No matter, I said, I will wait for her because she knew that it was useless to talk to the girl regarding that. Mrs. Darling knew her, but the daughter might not know her. I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. Hanukkah candle holder is the Feast of Lights, a Hebrew festival in December. So hung next to a mirror, we never used to use it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. Cumbersome means children difficult to carry or use through size because of the size or weight. So the Hanukkah candle holder was theirs. When the narrator entered into the room, she saw that candle holder. Won't you sit down? Asked the girl. She held open the door of the living room and I went inside past her. I stopped horrified. I was in a room I knew and did not know. Very, very important, children. She was in a room, she says, that she knew and did not know at the same time. Why she knew? Because all those things that were kept in the room, they were theirs. Therefore, she recognized each and everything that was present in the room and did not know because she had entered into Mrs. Darling's house for the first time. I found myself in the midst of the things I did want to see again, but which oppressed me in the strange atmosphere. Why oppressed me? Because those things that were kept in her house, they were in a different manner, and now they appeared to be so strange because they were kept here and there in Mrs. Darling's house, or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged, because of the ugly furniture or a muggy smell that hung there. I don't know, but I scarcely dared to look around me. So it was so strange feeling for her because all those things that were kept in the room, in the house, they were all theirs. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing because she knew that woolen tablecloth was prepared by her mother. I followed the lines of the pattern of the design. Somewhere on the edge there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. So she remembered that on that woolen tablecloth there was a burn mark. So she was trying to find out that unrepaired burn mark, where was it?